Welcome to Conflict News 24. Viewers, on the 13th of December, after around 48 hours, US-Africa summit will be held in Washington, D.C. Why is US interested in revitalizing its relations with Africa? Why is Africa important for US? Why is Africa important for Russia? Why is Africa important for China? The three main powers of the world, EU as well, they're trying to enhance their presence, their influence in Africa. What does Africa hold for them? Firstly, on the 13th of December, US-Africa summit will be held in Washington, and out of 54 members of African Union, 49 have been invited to attend the summit. Eritrea has not been invited by US. Eritrea has remained under US sanctions for years, and Eritrea, US don't have full diplomatic relations, though a US shock d'affaires has been appointed to Eritrea. 4 African countries suspended by African Union for coups in the countries have not been invited as well. Sudan not invited, Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. So 49 heads of state have been extended invitation by US government. Firstly, what type of presence does US have in Africa and China, Russia too? US has its military presence in Africa. We know that US Africa Command is operational, and in several countries of Africa, US military bases are functional. In Djibouti, there is a US military base. In Kenya, Uganda, Gabon, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Nigeria, Chad, there are US military bases. Apart from these countries, in some other countries of Africa too, there is US military presence. If you compare US military presence and Russian military presence, Chinese military presence in Africa, Russia and China have lesser military presence in Africa, especially China. China has only one military base in Africa, and that is in Djibouti, which was established in 2017. Just one military base. China is considering setting up another base, naval base in Africa, in Namibia or Equatorial Guinea. Russia has its military presence in Africa in a different way. It does not have military bases like US has in Africa, but it has presence there in Africa through Wagner. Wagner is a private security company, but not private. Reportedly, it is affiliated with Russian government, Russian military. And Wagner fighters are in Africa. We saw that in Libya, that in Libyan civil war, Wagner fighters supported LNA of Khalifa Haftar. So in Libya, Sudan, Central African Republic, Mozambique, Madagascar, there is presence of Wagner fighters. In some other countries of Africa too, there are Wagner offices. So you see that US has much more military presence in Africa than China or Russia. When it comes to economic ties between Africa and US, Africa and China, Africa and Russia, China is far ahead. China is Africa's largest trading partner. China imports minerals and oil from Africa. Africa imports manufactured items from China. Africa-US trade is declining. Gradually, we're seeing a decline. On the other hand, Africa-China trade is rising. Russia is not a key trading partner of Africa, but lately Russia has been trying to enhance its economic relations with Africa. So, in terms of trade, you see that China has more influence in Africa. Chinese construction companies, other companies, are working in different countries of Africa. So why does Africa matter for China, Russia, or the US? Why are they trying to enhance their presence, military presence, economic presence in Africa? Africa, we know that is the richest continent in terms of mineral resources: gold, diamond, cobalt, platinum, chromium, and several other metals and minerals are in abundance in Africa. And we know that countries of the world, Russia, EU, China as well, they are interested in having their influence in those countries of Africa which are rich in mineral resources. EU as well, though Africa, several countries of Africa were colonized by some European countries, but still France and the European countries, they have their presence in some African countries. But EU's influence is also declining in Africa. That is why China is stepping in, Russia is stepping in. So African mineral resources is one of the factor behind increased interest of global powers in Africa. Secondly, geography. Africa, why is that US has a naval base in Djibouti, France to Italy as well, UK to China too? Why? Because Djibouti is on a strategic maritime route. So Africa is strategic in terms of access to countries through Red Sea. And thirdly, political influence. We have seen in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war that whenever resolutions were tabled at UN General Assembly, at UN Human Rights Council, African countries supported Russia. Not all of them, but several of them supported Russia. Eritrea stood openly with Russia and some other African countries as well. That is why perhaps Ukraine has appointed a special envoy for Africa who has been trying to improve Ukraine-Africa relations. So Africa seems to be supporting Russia in Russia-Ukraine conflict. Why? Because we know that Africa has its historical grievances against Europe, that European countries colonized African countries. Russia never colonized Africa. China never colonized Africa. So in terms of past grievances, Africans have the grievances against Europeans, a little bit Americans too, but Russians and Chinese, they were not part of any colonization in Africa. So that is why we're seeing that Africa seems to be standing with Russia. Majority of African countries in the war which is ongoing between Russia and Ukraine. So that is why increased US interest is being seen in improving US relations with Africa. But question is, what has US to offer to Africa? Africa needs investments. Africa needs trade. China is Africa's largest trading partner. US does not need African oil. US is interested in African mineral resources, but not African oil. China needs African oil. So you see that China-Africa relation future is brighter than US-Africa relations. That is why gradually we are seeing that Chinese influence, a soft influence in the form of investments in the form of trade is increasing. US is concerned, it wants to regain the losses which it is suffering in terms of influence in Africa. That is why this summit will be held between the 13th of December and 15th of December in Washington, D.C. Thank you for watching.